Hedges, consultant with Land and Legacy, here to talk about brood cover, bare ground, and whatever other topics come up today. We're standing out here on a grassland unit, a native prairie, and I'm standing in a burn unit. And we want to talk about the purpose of disturbances, whether it's fire, grazing, or some other disturbance to create brood cover. We're in Missouri today, and especially here in the Midwest, anything from Missouri east, we get too high rainfall most years for the habitat that quail want to live in, and it gets really thick really fast. So we need to disturb things to keep it open enough for birds to be able to move around, especially small chicks. We can look down here and we can look at, this was burned just this spring, just a month ago, and we've already have some adequate growth to conceal chicks. But we can see bare ground. When chicks are hatching out in the next month, and they'll be hatching out all summer, they'll be able to move around between these clumps of vegetation. They'll be able to actively seek out insects. And also it keeps them from getting exposed to moisture, exposed to too much dew. Small quail chicks, when they first hatch out, can't thermoregulate, so it's important that they don't get wet. They can't regulate their body temperature till they're a couple weeks old. This also changes plant diversity. When we do disturbances as with fire or grazing, even in a native grass planting where we might do strip disking, strip spraying, it increases forbs, weeds, whatever you want to call them, broadleaf plants. In this case, we're looking for those forbs. We can reduce grass dominance and increase the forb dominance. And we have all kinds of different forbs here, different broadleaf plants. And all of these have different insects that are attracted to them. You've heard Matt and Adam talk lots of times about diversity in the deer world and how important it is. Well, if you're a quail chick, they're living off bugs all summer. And the more diversity we can provide them with bugs to eat, the more selectivity they have. So they may or may not need a certain number of green bugs or blue bugs or orange bugs any given day, but they'll be able to find that if we have a diversity of plants that attracts a diversity of insects. A lot of these plants also are going to produce seeds, which are winter food. So in this grassland landscape, there's no row crop behind me. We have quail living out here year-round, doing quite well, in fact. The populations are really good on this specific site that we're standing on, because there's native seeds. These plants have been here for thousands of years, and quail have lived off of these plants for thousands of years. So it's important for the summertime for that diversity to attract different diversity of insects, but it's also important to have a diversity of plants for seed production for fall and winter. Certain plants are going to drop seeds earlier than others. So some of those under snow won't be available. They drop their seeds early. Those are plants that they're going to eat the seeds from, in the fall. Other plants are going to hold their seeds till later into the winter. So all of that diversity is important. If we just have a monoculture, only 2 or 3 species, and they all shatter early, we may not have that food available when it comes January or February, when things get really tough. We'll step over here and we'll look at a unit that hasn't been burned for 2 years. Now we can zoom into this and see there's a lot of litter here. There's almost no bare ground. There's minimal. The former year's vegetation is laid over, the new growth is coming up, and even if you dig down in there, it's hard to find bare ground. And we need to define bare ground. When Frank and I talk about bare ground in the upland world, the quail and pheasant world, we're talking about at ground level. We're talking from a quail's eye view, right? Lots of time Adam and Matt are talking about they don't want a bunch of bare ground for soil health's sake. They're talking about wide open disc fields, of having some type of coverage out there. So it's 2 different descriptions of bare ground, and it's important to denote the differences in that. Quail, the early nests, they'll utilize these units. We need some of it to be unburned because we need some areas for them to nest. But if we were on a 3, 4, 5, 6 year burn rotation, a lot of this is unusable for broods. In fact, we have research done in Missouri that shows that less than 10% of the broods will utilize something if it wasn't burned or grazed or somehow disturbed in the last 12 months. In other words, if it's idle grassland, it almost gets no use. By broods, it's just too thick. So we need to manage at a minimum on a 3-year return interval, if not shorter, even every other year, some type of disturbance, being grazing, burning, or something else. We have some of the plant diversity. We have the plant diversity doesn't completely disappear, but it's just not accessible, especially for chicks. Adults will use some of this. Also in these burn units, you'll already notice, we'll just step right back out here, the vegetation height is already recovering. It's providing some element of canopy coverage, so they can move about safely. You know, they're always trying to hide from various raptors when they're out here doing their thing. So it doesn't take long. This has only been burned for 1 month, and the canopy has already reached a height that it will conceal chicks moving around. We also have research in Missouri that documents they'll nest in burn units. They don't have to have the brown litter to make a nest. And in fact, in a very big research study done on grassland sites here in Missouri, we had over half the nests didn't even begin incubation until after July 1. And a lot of those selected burn units to nest in. And that vegetation got tall enough to conceal them comfortably. They deposited a nest in there. And I think one of the main reasons is they would select to nest in those units because they knew they could hatch out and raise their brood there without having to travel great distances to go find brood cover. In a lot of instances in the past, managers have broken pieces into segments where we have brood cover over here and then we have nesting cover over here, and they may be 300 or 400 yards apiece. So we're expecting birds to hatch out bumblebee-size chicks and then walk them 400 yards to get to the brood habitat, assuming they even know where that is. These grassland systems, we can manage it all in the same space for the most part. We have scattered burn units, checkerboarded across the landscape, so there's early nesting and there's brood habitat everywhere. They can move into those burn units for later nesting. We have the best of both worlds.